And we're live. Ace, how are you doing?
Oh, thank you so much. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for inviting me back.
It's no problem. Happy to have you. I'm just gonna say the link real quick from Twitter.
Hmm.
Try to make so it's so people can get in the chat if they have any questions. Because
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but the Ross Ulbricht story, I don't know if I missed it completely. If I wasn't paying attention when it happened, I didn't hear about it till like maybe a month and a half ago.
Oh, wow.
So
That's
I
crazy. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that's what it's like for a lot of people too, you know? Yeah.
so what
It's been a big pet issue for me for a long time. It's infuriating, truly.
isn't it your pin tweet, isn't it? It has to have
Yes.
free Ross.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
So when did this happen exactly? Like how long ago was this?
Hmm. Well, he was first arrested in 2013, all the way back in
Wow.
2013. The investigation was going on all the way back in 2011, or closer to around 2011, 2012, somewhere around there when it started. So it's been a long time. It's been a very long time.
Well, let's start at the beginning. Who is Ross
Yeah.
Ulbricht, and what did he do that got him accused of all these terrible things?
Yeah, so without putting words in his mouth, I would say Ross Ulbricht is one of us in some sense. He campaigned for Ron Paul. He was, pretty. He got pretty big into Mises and Rothbard, and he wanted to create a website or some place where people could express their freedom in some way. And originally, he actually tried to create a video game that would kind of like explain to people like economic theory, like the Austrian economic theory. That didn't really go where he wanted it to go, and never really got developed. But he then turned his sites to creating like an e-commerce site, and it became known as, if anyone on the internet if you've been on the internet for a long time and maybe some of the like shadier parts of the internet, you might know the Silk Road, and that was his creation. It was essentially an online site accessed through Tor, which is a very separate, like an easy way to explain it would be like a separate browser that is very encrypted and it's hard to track. Essentially, that's like it's a lot more technical than that, but I won't get bogged down in technical details here. Um, but you could only access it through Tor, and it was essentially an anonymous site where you paid in Bitcoin, and this was a very early use case for Bitcoin. This was all the way back in 2011, 2010, 2011. Um, and you could pay and you could just exchange freely with people. There's some people who say that it was just whatever you want to put on there you can put on there, but that wasn't true. Ross did have rules for the site, like it was essentially based around the NAP, the non-aggression principle, which is that like you can't put stolen property on here, you can't put anything that would lead to someone causing harm to another person directly, and you can't and like child pornography was obviously banned. So there were like standards to the site. um so yeah, Ross, essentially this was like a passion project for him. He really wanted to like create a way where people could like freely interact without the state coming in and ruining things, essentially.
Make a little techno and Capistan, I guess.
Yeah.
Nice. That's very cool. So, how long did he operate? Do you know how long he operated before he kind of got investigated and the whole thing went south?
Yes. So Ross, I believe, only started it, and then he handed it off in, I believe, like late 2011. I actually have notes here. I can double check, but I'm pretty sure. So Ross Ross did not have a lot of technical experience, particularly. So there were a lot of like people who used the site who told him about like some of the technical problems with the site. And eventually he earned, there was an anonymous account that earned his trust over time because he helped him like with the site. And he eventually, Ross, in an email to one of his friends, I believe, or one of his roommate, I think it might have been, Ross talked about how I'm glad that's not my problem anymore, as in he had handed off the site to someone else somewhere in 2011. So about a year or so after it, he just pretty much got it running. It was essentially his idea, but he quickly handed it off to another person.
If he handed it off, why is he in jail? Like, it seems like
Well,
he did something.
that's the question, isn't it? So I think it's kind of interesting to go back because so this all started essentially when so it's hard. So when you actually go back, it's really interesting because when you actually look into like how they actually found the Silk Road, how the feds found the Silk Road and stuff like that, it's not quite clear exactly at what point in time or what was like the trigger point for them finding it. But you do have it starts, from my knowledge, with the Homeland Security investigator named Jared Derjagan. Yeah, Jared Derjagan is the name. And he essentially was the person who was tasked with finding out about the Silk Road, and he essentially launched this huge investigation. So the whole investigation into the Silk Road was his thing. And he eventually, this encompasses the New York FBI, the Baltimore DEA, all these different institutions, all these different like state groups are essentially coalescing to essentially take down Silk Road. And it created this like 3-year investigation into it. So it's important to understand about this thing is that you're going to hear terms like DPR, Dread Pirate Roberts, often used. And what the Dread Pirate Roberts was on Silk Road in relation to Silk Road was, it was this account that was essentially the admin of Silk Road, right? It was the main account. It was like the account that ran and distributed everything in Silk Road and had, the admin privileges of Silk Road. Now, Dread Pirate Roberts, it's if you've seen The Princess Bride, it's an allusion to that, where it's like it's a persona and it gets passed down between various people over time, right? So the claim here is that so I'm going to like speed through it a little bit, but we can go back and like go into like whatever you want. But essentially, the main claim is that they charged him on conspiracy to traffic drugs, right, including a kingpin charge. And what they tried to associate Ross with was they're trying to say that Ross was Dread Pirate Roberts on the site. And when they say that Ross is Dread Pirate Roberts, they claim to have chat logs, right? They do, but they can't claim that it was, from Ross, but they claim to have chat logs from DPR where, he's talking about like, drug transactions or drug deals or things like that, of that nature. And that's their main evidence here. It all hinges on Ross being Dread Pirate Roberts, and that's the entire foundation for the case. But I think as we go into this, we'll quickly see that there's a good evidence to show that Ross was not Dread Pirate Roberts, or at the very least, there were many of them at a time.
So maybe you haven't answered it. I don't know what it is. What is a kingpin charge? Like, how is that?
Sorry.
That does the things.
Yeah. So the kingpin charge is a charge that someone like El Chapo would have, like drug cartel leaders, people who essentially orchestrate large industrial-sized drug transactions and trades, essentially. So this is what they charged Ross with, and he was found guilty on it, which is actually insane when you think about it, because Ross did not actually ever sell any drugs. Ross merely had a website where some drugs were sold. And mind you, Silk Road sold a whole lot of things. Some of them were drugs, right? A lot of them were drugs. But that wasn't the intention for the site itself. You know what I mean? It was just an after effect of the site. So when you look at it like that, it's like there are currently laws on the books that protect sellers or vendors, like social media companies and sites. They're legally protected from what their users sell on their own sites, right? Like people sell drugs on Craigslist all the time, but no one takes Craigslist down. There's no investigation to Craigslist to try to take it down. Drugs can be sold on eBay. And the fact that AT&T knows, for example, that some people are going to use their services to sell drugs or like communicate a transaction to sell drugs, but they're never actually ever prosecuted for that. So this is a very specific case where it seems like they just threw out, because coming at this from when you may not hear about this case, it's like, okay, you may want to give the best interpretation possible to the prosecution here, just to be fair in some sense. But it's like, no, when you look into this, it's absolutely insane how this ever happened, like on the books anyway.
Yeah. Now, why was he so targeted? What do you think made him and the Silk Road such a different target than, say, Craigslist or eBay or something else? Like, what was so different about it that it was directly targeted?
So this is interesting. This is where it really gets interesting, right? The Silk Road was this is just a theory. We obviously can't read the minds of the people who started the investigation or anything, but I think this is probably a good theory. Silk Road was one of the very first places where Bitcoin was like universalized in some sense, right? The only way you could purchase anything on Silk Road was through Bitcoin. And previously, prior to the investigation starting, prior to Yagin's investigation, Chuck Schumer put out a report saying how we need to crack down on Bitcoin and dark market transactions on the internet. So I who knows if like some strings were pulled behind the scenes from Schumer, and we'll hear his name multiple times in this case because he actually has his claws deeply in this case, which is actually not a surprise if you know who Schumer is. Yeah, Schumer's a terrible person.
Yeah. I feel like he gets overlooked sometimes. Like, everyone talks about Pelosi or Hillary, and like I feel like Schumer gets overlooked, and it's like he shouldn't be.
Oh yeah, no, Schumer is like a modern day crime boss. You know, he's just
he looks like it too.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So back to Ross a little bit. So Ross kind of dropped it, wasn't really involved in it. Did he ever?
Yeah, November. I found the date. November 2011 was when he said he handed it off.
2011. Did he ever get like back involved at any point during this investigation? They kind of like draw him into the eye of the investigation, or?
Yes. So Ross did get back involved. So Ross did get back involved. In fact, right, and it's hard to talk about this because there's also so many other moving pieces around when this happens. So Ross does get back involved, and in fact, it's right when he gets back involved that he gets arrested. In fact, in this whole thing, so I think it's important to probably back up just a little bit here because there's also some really dirty stuff about some of the DEA agents and what they did. In fact, two agents in particular. So Duryagan and this other guy McFarland, they were the two people responsible for, I forget McFarland's other first name, I'll find it in a second. So Duryagan and McFarland were essentially tasked with this investigating the Silk Road in the first place, right? And they were kind of jockeying for control behind the scenes for like who was going to spearhead this investigation. And they brought in, I think McFarland brought in the Baltimore DEA, the Drug Administration there, and so there's two people here that are very dirty, crooked cops. Shocker here. Karl Mark Force and Sean Bridges. Now, Karl Mark Force was a Baltimore DEA agent, and Sean Bridges was a ex-Secret Service agent, and I believe he was working at the NSA at the time. And what happened with them was they were investigating the Silk Road, and I'm sorry. There's also one more player in here that's very important. It's crucial to mention, which is Mark Karpeles, I believe. Yeah, Mark Karpeles. So Karpeles was essentially the person who was hosting Silk Road as a server. And he was an early Bitcoin entrepreneur in some sense. He ran a Bitcoin exchange. And he's also kind of a shady figure who we'll delve into here in a little bit. But so the Duryagan's investigation led them to Karpeles in some sense, and they suspected him early on. But back to the agents. The two agents, Karl Mark Force and Sean Bridges, these guys infiltrated the Silk Road, right? So they're undercover on the Silk Road, as kind of like as that happens. And what happened was they were I forget the pseudonym they had, but they were disguised obviously as just another user, and they were trying to make a cocaine purchase, I believe it was, with another user. And the other user kind of suspected that they were actually, undercover agents. He did not. He thought there was something suspicious about them. So he backed off. But the DPR, whoever was DPR at that time, wanted to use a middleman, right? And this middleman was named Curtis Green. So Curtis Green was a staff member for Silk Road. He'd been a staff member for quite a little bit on there. And Curtis Green, was the middleman here. So he received the drugs. He, intercepted the drugs at his house first. And when he intercepted the drugs, the agents arrested him immediately, right at his home. So they got him, but see, here's when where it gets like really dirty. Is Karl Mark Force and Sean Bridges coerced him into giving up the password info to his account on Silk Road. So they got access to his staff member. So he had some admin privileges with his account because he was a staff member, and he was in the Karl Mark Force and Sean Bridges were able then to reset passwords, assume hijack other accounts on there, hijack high-level vendors on the Silk Road, and they stole the Bitcoins from those accounts. So yeah.
Which one were these? This was
Karl Mark Force and Sean Bridges. Yeah.
Write that down. Bitcoin thieves.
Yep. So yeah, so they essentially just got. So not only that, right? So they hijacked accounts by resetting these top level vendors' passwords from the Silk Road. Took accessed their accounts, drained the vendor, drained them of their Bitcoin. But then before they moved it to, so I told you before, Carpellis had this Bitcoin exchange, right? He was like he ran one of the early Bitcoin exchanges. So they attempted to move the Bitcoin to Carpellis's exchange, but before they did that, they moved it to Green's. They moved it to Green's account, Curtis Green's account, the guy who they just arrested. So they tried to frame him and make it look like he was the one who seized the Bitcoins from those people. So they tried to frame him first, right? And so right off the bat, we have two agents who have gone rogue in some sense. Who knows if they had other collaborators? Probably. But two agents who went rogue on the site and were just extorting people for their Bitcoins essentially, and extorting DPR. Now, the agents then went to DPR, whoever Dread Pirate Roberts was, whoever was running that account at the time, and they said, "Look, Curtis stole all these Bitcoin from you," and then the DPR, seemingly, mind you, we're not sure if these logs are actually how accurate they are, but this is just the best evidence we have at the moment. The DPR was like, okay, sorry. So when they're undercover and they're talking to DPR thinks that these guys are somehow involved with the cartel, right? That they're drug smugglers and they're somehow involved with the cartel. It's obviously bullshit, but that's what they sold to DPR. So DPR is like, okay, can you go and help, go find Curtis Green and get him to give the Bitcoins back, right? So they say yes, and then what they do is they have Curtis Green fake his own death, as if to make it look like they put out a hit on him, right? So they coerce him to fake his own death. I think they even threatened his family. So they made him fake his own death, and then they posted pictures of his fake dead body to DPR, and whatever. Okay, now that's just a little piece of all the things that happened when the feds got involved in the site. Then those same people who were using undercover accounts also later threatened to turn them over to the feds if they didn't. They were trying to extort more Bitcoins from them, and they were saying, look, we're going to turn you over to the feds unless you give us more Bitcoin on an annual or a monthly basis or whatever, right? So you can see where this is going. So then DPR, apparently, at least in the logs, it seems to be that DPR puts out a hit on this person who's trying to extort them, or is looking to put out a hit on these people who are trying to extort them. And that's the main source of evidence that they have. Sorry, I shouldn't even say that's evidence, because we'll get to this in a second. So the main claim you hear from anyone whenever you talk about Ross Ulbricht is you talk about Ross Ulbricht, you're going to get someone, it's like a law. You're going to get someone in your mentions who's talking about how, well, no, Ross hired hitmen to kill people, right? You hear this all the time. One, you can't prove that Ross was the DPR. We'll go more into that in just a little bit, but I think that's you just can't prove that he was the DPR, first off. And two, you can't even prove that those chat logs were essentially accurate, right? They considering that the two agents had control of the website and they had control of the accounts, and they knew how to hijack accounts and take them over, right? So that already is enough, reasonable doubt to assume that, hey, there might be something here that's just not right. But afterwards, after the DE agents got involved, right, you sort of had this fighting for control in the background between Derjagan and McFarland. They kept going at it. Derjagan was very suspicious of Carpellis, Carpellis was the Bitcoin exchange guy. He was the guy who was running, essentially, he was hosting the Silk Road servers, which they later found in Iceland, I believe. Yeah, I think that's right. They found him in Iceland. But he was a very shady guy. And Derjagan wanted to continue to investigate Carpellis, but McFarland, or some of the other guys, were wanting just to get Carpellis to essentially to talk and to rat someone out. So they gave him immunity if he would rat someone out, right? And we don't know who who he ratted out, but all we know is that Ross was very shortly arrested afterwards, right? So, so it's very important to remember here that Ross had seemingly little to no involvement in Silk Road, and that there's good evidence to support why that's true. So the DPR is right, as I think I mentioned before. It's like, it's meant to be, an allusion to like, this persona which you pass down through multiple people, right? So that alone should like give you a little hint. That's not evidence, but you can kind of get the idea of what was going on here. So the idea that there were multiple Dread Pirate Roberts comes from one, Curtis Green himself, the guy who was like, who was like faked his own death or whatever, was coerced to fake his own death. He, one, believes Ross is innocent in this whole thing, and two, he also says there were multiple people running the Dread Pirate Roberts account, and he was one of them at one time, right? So even he said that. Another point was that there was a secret handshake. A guy named, I think, Andrew Jones. I think that's his name, Andrew Jones. He was another person on Silk Road, a frequent user. I think he might have been a staff member too. I'm not 100% sure. Sorry about that. But anyway, he would have conversations with one of the DPRs, and he knew pretty well. And they eventually gave like a secret handshake, right? And what a secret handshake means is that like one person says a code phrase, and the other person, if they're the same, if they're who they say they are, they'll know the other code phrase, the other part of the code phrase, right? So Andrew Jones would go to this DPR and he would say, "And do you have any good reading recommendations?" And the DPR was supposed to say anything by Rothbard. That was supposed to be the secret handshake. So the DPR so the date that the hits went out, the date that they say that this person called in hits to take out Curtis Green or to take out other people who were trying to extort them, Andrew Jones asked the secret handshake like right around that time, and the DPR did not know. The DPR did not like finish the handshake. They did not know this other part of the code phrase. So that's also another good piece of evidence to suggest that there's obviously more people who run this account. And that also, mind you, that's just to say that we're not even saying that is necessarily Ross, just that there are multiple people. One of them might have been Ross, but even then we have no proof that Ross was one of them. Now, where this all kind of comes together at though is I think it's in, let me see, I think it's in October of 2013. Yes. So October of 2013, they eventually, first they tapped Ross's, they were able to get a geolocation of Ross's whereabouts by tapping into his data, which they found his email on, I think, like on Carpel's Bitcoin Exchange forum website, I believe, or it might have been the Silk Road forum, one of those two. And they found Ross's email, and they essentially were able to like extrapolate where, like, they used the email and they did some, technical mumbo jumbo to essentially find Ross, find his location, and they found him. So he was at a library when he got arrested, right? So what they did was, I'm sorry, I skipped over something very crucial here. So Der Jagen, the main investigator here, infiltrated the site as well, right? So he infiltrated the site, and he then essentially used one of the staff members as an informant who was on the site. They got a staff member on the inside there, essentially. And Der Jagen was under the alias of Cirrus, I believe it was the name of the account on the Silk Road. And he would be in chats with DPR, right? And what happened was, for a long time, he would just be in chats, and then he also had another account called Mr. Wonderful, I believe was the name of the account on Silk Road. So there's multiple accounts they're just trying to essentially talk to DPR, see what information they can get out of him, right? It's just like an entrapment. So what would happen is, so there was an account by Der Jagen called Mr. Wonderful, and then there was another account called Not Wonderful. Now, Not Wonderful was not actually issued by the investigation. And the theory is, we don't know 100%, but the theory is that it was Sean Bridges or Karl Mark Force, who was probably not wonderful. And the reason for this is Not Wonderful was feeding DPR inside information that they were under investigation and that there were feds on their website trying to get information out of them. But they would but they would threaten to turn them in if they did not pay them in Bitcoin, right? So they were being extorted. It was like a two-way. It was just like two different agencies doing opposite things, and one was just trying to extort money for information, and the other was trying to get information out of DPR. It's just an insane story when you really delve into it now. Duryagan was under the alias of Cirrus, which was one of the staff member accounts on there, I believe, or one of the high trusted accounts on there. And he thought that after they've had long conversations back and forth, and one day, so Ross was at a library, I believe, in California. He was living in California at the time of his arrest. And he went to a library. He opened his laptop, and so Ross. The reason people think it's Ross is that when Ross opened his laptop, he had communications of DPR. Like, he had access to the site still, and he still had the login to the DPR account. So when Duryagan is sitting in a cafe, I think across the library on his computer, and he's under the pseudonym or under this account of Cirrus talking to DPR. And he's trying to engage in a conversation with them, and Ross sees this pop up on his computer because I think Cirrus is asking him a technical question. Oh, can you help me with something or some other? And Ross sees this, and Ross tries to log in to the DPR account. And as soon as he logs into the DPR account, some people in the library start fighting, right? And Ross goes to break up this fight, but little does he know that those were agents staging this. So right when he gets up to break up this fight, agents come over, tackle him to the ground, and grab his laptop immediately. So what one of the agents immediately sticks a USB file into his computer and starts to extract files out of the computer. And in doing so, he actually damages some of the metadata with the files. He starts copying and overwriting some of the files. And this is really technical, but it essentially means that it was nearly impossible for them to track a digital fingerprint to the corresponding files, which means that they can't be sure now that the things that were on his computer were originally from him, or if he just had them on his computer from some other source. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. So when they're doing that, they then take him to So they take him to jail. I'm trying to remember. Sorry about that. I'm trying to remember if I missed anything. Yeah, he's in the library.
This is a crazy story.
It's a crazy story. It's absolutely insane. Yeah. Oh, when Ross logged into the DPR account, he was. This is another point of evidence that he had not been active on the website in a while, at least, because he said when he logged into the DPR account, he told Duryagan, he didn't know he was Duryagan, obviously, but he told Duryagan that the admin tools were giving him problems and he was having trouble doing some stuff on the side, which if he'd been running DPR for a long time, then he would know what he was doing. Do you know what I mean? But he was having trouble right when he logged in about how to do stuff. And he said he was having trouble with some of the flagging admin privileges. And what that means is that Ross, the admin tools he was having problems with were the problems where you would take down flagged things from the site. So child porn or stolen property. So there's some inclination that Ross probably logged in, saw some things on the site that he didn't want there, and was trying to take them down when he was arrested. That's at least the theory. At least we can't prove. We can't read minds, but that's at least what that is. So Ross got distracted. They took his laptop. They arrested him. And this is the crazy thing, right? So Ross is sitting in jail, right? The DPR account gets logged in after Ross is in jail.
Kind of proves it might not have been him.
Right. Yeah, you at the very least proves that there's more of them than him. which is not. So once we get to the actual trial, it's going to be bananas. Like the trial is by far the most insane
Let me get
thing.
a second page up here because I've already fed my whole page of notes.
Oh yeah, I have a bunch of notes too. Yeah.
This is a crazy fucking story.
Yes.
Like, has anyone in the space tried to make this into a movie yet or a documentary?
Oh, I mean, there's Alex.
The
Alex Winter made a documentary about it, or at least partially about it. I think it's called Dark Web or Deep Web, one of the two.
I'll look it up afterward and put in the description.
Yeah. So the laptop was given to a guy by the name of Christopher Beeson, and he was a private investor. He was he was essentially like a private contractor that often works with like the FBI and stuff like that. And apparently, when he was working with the laptop to try to do, it's technical, so I won't get bogged down to too many technical details. But if you go on like freeross.org, they have a long lit transcript and source of like everything that happened with this. But he apparently damaged some files when he was copying it, and he tried to extract the data from the RAM, like do a RAM extract on the computer, and he kept trying to do it, and it was giving him failures, and he ran a program that is commonly known as Disk Destroyer, DD. Because the risk is that sometimes you can just destroy the whole like disk in the computer, and it can just like it'll be no good. So he was trying to run this program, and he failed multiple times at running it. And that alone is proof that, or not proof, but there's evidence there that certain things on the computer might have gone damaged or just overwritten, or a bunch of different things. So eventually he gave the info he extracted from the computer to Duryagin. And so Duryagin still thought that Karpeles was in on it, because why Karpeles was really shady was that he essentially was. So the theory is that Karpeles might have been the DPR who took over from Ross, at least, or one of the DPRs. There's no proof of that, obviously, so I'll just say allegedly, for legal reasons. So they think Karpeles, the theory is that Karpeles might have been, again, we can't prove that, but Karpeles had some pretty shady dealings in the past, like things like that, and he had, I'm trying to remember exactly what happened. I know I have it in my notes somewhere here, but so Karpeles immediately wanted immunity. He was like, I'll rat someone out and just give you someone, but as long as you just like give me complete legal immunity. And Duryagin, who was investigating Karpeles, so Duryagin, the guy who was originally behind this whole Silk Road investigation, he originally, that's right. So Karpeles originally was going to meet with one of the agents in Guam, apparently, which is like the source of like the NSA, one of the big NSA headquarters in Guam. There's just very shady things with Karpeles here. But he was granted legal immunity, against Duryagin's wishes, because Duryagin still thought that he might be the culprit here, and he wanted to get the actual culprit. But he was given immunity. And it kind of sorry, I lost my train. Oh, okay, yeah. So after he was given immunity and he got ratted out, then Ross, got arrested. After Ross was arrested, and they were trying to extract the information from the laptop, it got damaged and it was sent to Duryagin. And Duryagin looked at it and he's like, "There's something that's still missing here." And he's like, "I still suspect Karpeles, even after there was all this information." So even the lead investigator of this thought, there's a good chance it might be Karpeles. And Duryagin was pretty upset that there were people in his own organization and other organizations that were essentially going behind his back and like not letting him like do what he wanted with Karpeles. But anyway, let's see. So Ross hired a defense attorney, Joshua Dratel. And I'll just read off some of the names here that are going to be like important, like coming up. Joshua Dratel, who was the Ross's defense attorney, and you have Saren Turner, who was a New York prosecutor. Let's see. So those will be the names for now. So anyway, Turner claimed that Ross was responsible for the murders for hire, one. And he also claimed that Ross was the sole DPR. He was the only one, right? But here's the thing, right? So when Ross got arrested and they were at his bail hearing, right? Turner brought up that Ross was extremely dangerous because he was responsible for hiring hitmen in an attempted murder for hire, right? As we talked about earlier. So he brought that up, but when it came to the actual trial, Turner never charged him with murder for hire. He just used that to deny Ross bail. Like, that was it.
Fuck, that's just terrible.
Yeah.
That is.
Yes.
I shouldn't be shocked anymore at how terrible our court system is, but I'm still fucking shocked.
Oh yeah, this whole, like, I was already an anarchist when this whole thing happened, but when I learned about this story, but it was like such a black pill, you know, even more. You're not surprised, but you're not shocked. You're just disappointed. You know what I mean? It's like, oh God, it's terrible. So yeah, even with I think there were like 70 different letters from like Ross's loved ones that talked about how please don't deny him bail, and they pledged collectively $1 million for Ross's bail, and they still denied him bail even after that. So Turner the prosecutor then met with Ross, and the first interaction he had with him, he immediately threatened him and said, "Look, you can take my plea deal that'll get you like 10 years at least, or I could throw the kingpin charge on you, and you could go to jail for life, essentially, with it, or close to it." So it's just absolutely insane, right? And that tells you what prosecutors do. Oh boy, yeah. Here's the judge. So the judge's name is Catherine Forrest. So this is when it really gets infuriating. If you thought what you heard before was infuriating, this is just going to be over the top. So Ross refused to cooperate with the pardon. So Ross was charged with the conspiracy to distribute drugs, distribute fake IDs, computer hacking, and the kingpin charge. Those were his charges. He was never charged with attempted murder for hire. So that's a very important point that we'll touch on later, is that he was not charged with the murder for hire. That was never brought up, or it was never charged, I should say. So the judge raised the point that Ross had essentially created Silk Road to distribute drugs, which was also just not true. That was not his intent. You know, it might have been something he knew was going to happen, but it was not the sole reason for starting Silk Road. Sorry, I have a lot of notes here. Sorry about that.
Good. I'm amazed you don't have like what's a beautiful mind room.
Oh yeah, right.
Like, there's enough information here for that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So at this point, Karl Mark Force and Sean Bridges were both being investigated behind the scenes, right? They were both being investigated, and so Turner, the prosecutor, knew they were being investigated at this time, but did not allow the defense to bring that information up, or the judge to bring up that the two cops who were heavily involved in this case were under investigation for extortion, and all these other crimes on the site, because they were worried that it might harm the investigation if we reveal details about this. So essentially, they're using evidence that was partially acquired from these two men, when they know that these two men were crooked. So that just goes to show you how bad this gets. So yeah, Bridges and Force were both interrogated, and they of course denied involvement with DPR, even though that was later turned out that they did have involvement.
Have they been charged with anything, or are they still cops?
Yes. So no, they actually, if we skip ahead a little bit, after Ross was charged, they eventually both spent 6 years in prison.
So they're convicted felons for their efforts in the investigation. And
that's right. They stole,
and everything they used is still accepted in the court, and still.
That's right.
Fucking hell, man. This is. Oh, I hate this so much. This is just so fucking
it's so
disgusting.
infuriating, dude. Let's see. Oh yeah, so Karl Mark Force, his involvement was known to the judge. They and the like, and I believe Dreidel, who was the defense attorney, it was also known to him, but they were not allowed to bring it up because of fear that it would hamper the investigation. But Bridges, the other guy, the other dirtbag in here, Turner, this prosecutor, knew he was under investigation, but he didn't even tell the judge that. So not even the judge knew that Turner was under investigation. Go ahead.
I'm blown away here. I am absolutely blown away. I don't know how to put this. If this was a movie, I wouldn't believe it.
Right.
It sounds like what's that guy? A Guy Ritchie comedy. There's so many threads here. It doesn't seem real.
Yeah, it's like okay, at a certain point, it's like okay, enough. This is just like too much. Like it's just why. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Dreidel, the defense attorney, tried to argue that, hey, since these guys are under investigation and they play a key part in this whole story, we should wait until their investigation is done to see what happens when we should hold off on Ross's trial, because we need to see like how if these people were crooked or not. And the judge denied that. They're like, nope, we're not going to wait. We're just going to go ahead with the trial. So yeah, it just keeps getting worse and worse from here too. Oh yeah. So Chuck Schumer, everyone's favorite senator, sent a letter. This was in 2013, I think. Yeah. Oh yeah. It was late 2013 or early 2014. So Chuck Schumer sent a letter to Eric Holder, talking about how great it was Eric Holder.
Isn't that the Fast and Furious guy?
Yes, that's right.
I knew I recognized that name. Okay, Eric Holder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he sent a letter to Eric Holder talking about how great it was that we Silk Road had been shut down by now. It was no longer online. He was talking about how great it was that Silk Road was shut down and that they had its the person who was running it in custody. So, but he just assumed. So he just like kind of tarnished Ross's reputation in front of like anyone who read that, because that was like posted in the New York Times, I believe. So all these New York people who would be New York jurors now think that automatically have this perception in their minds that Ross is the guy who's running it. So you see, he kind of just poisoned the well for this whole investigation here by just assuming that it was Ross to begin with, right? Yeah. Hold on, I got. Oh, there we go. Okay, yeah. So. Duryagan testified in this case himself, but he was when Dreidel, the defense attorney, tried to press him on Karpelis's involvement. The prosecutor Turner, he objected. He immediately objected, and the judge sustained his objection. Like he went along with the objection. So it was like. The judge sided with him, and when they asked Dreidel, why are you bringing up this Karpelis fellow, he cited in Duryagan's own notes that, look, this guy's very suspicious, and if he had any involvement in here, like, that's important for the case. That's very important to know if like there were multiple DPRs or if he was involved somehow. So eventually, so here's a little twist coming up. The judge, after Dreidel, the defense attorney, talked about this, the judge essentially said, yeah, that is important to know. Yeah, okay, I see where you're going with this. Okay, I'll allow it. And then the very next is, first, sorry, I have to say, soon as Karpelis was brought up, the judge dismissed the jury early and told him to go home right as the Karpelis was brought up, which is also pretty weird, very strange. But anyway, so they were talking after the fact, and this is when Dreidel convinced the judge to allow the questioning of Duryagan about Karpelis to go forward. And the judge agreed. And when court resumed the very next day, the judge completely changed her mind and dismissed any question about Karpelis in this investigation, and told the jury to strike the name from their minds and not don't pay any attention to it.
That was the guy that was in Guam with the NSA thing?
Or yeah, so we don't know if it ever took place, but we know that was supposed to take. We don't know if the meeting between Karpeles and this FBI agent in Guam ever took place, but we know it was supposed to take place ostensibly. But
that is some like I'm not much of a conspiracy theorist, but the lines are there.
Right. It's very easy to make these connections for sure. The judge struck all mentions of Karpeles from the jury and the records. After she told the defense attorney that it was going to be allowed, she completely did a 180 the next time the jury reconvened. Curtis Green admitted to being DPR. And the defense. So the prosecutor kept on claiming that Ross was the only DPR, right? Just that was their whole thing. I don't think Curtis Green ever testified, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong on that. I talked about the handshake. Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah. So the guy who I was telling you about, Andrew Jones, before, he was the one who made like the secret handshake with the DPR, and the prosecution never like struck them from the list of potential witnesses when they learned that, apparently. So they did not want that coming out, of course, because they obviously want to prosecute Ross. The prosecutor showed unsubstantiated chat logs showing that. So yeah, this is infuriating. The prosecution, I remember before when we said Ross was never charged for hiring hitmen, right? Mm-hmm. It's never a charge. Even though he's never charged for this, the prosecution, Turner, he went and showed the chat log, the unsubstantiated chat logs, which we don't know if are real or if someone else who was running the DPR account for, there's all these different variables that show, it might not have been Ross. He shows the chat logs in which DPR seemingly hires a hit on another person who was the undercover agents, it turned out to be, obviously. And he's showing this to the jury and accusing Ross of doing this when he was never charged with it.
Wait, hold on. The judges allowed him to bring up an actual crime in the DPR account, but never actually didn't charge him with it.
Yeah, it wasn't about the charges. Yes, he brought something up that was not related to the charges. Yes.
How that doesn't seem like it's a legal. That seems so out of like legal court bounds. Like it doesn't seem like a. Holy shit.
Yeah. It's infuriating.
They railroaded this guy.
Yes, they did. Yes, and in fact, it's funny you said that because there's a podcast there's a production called Railroaded, which actually talks about just this whole thing. And if you want the full thing, I think it's like a few hours long or whatever, like maybe like 4 hours long. It's definitely worth it. I'll send it to you, and you can link it in the description.
Thank you. Yeah, if I can sit through a 59-hour documentary on Chris Cam, I could probably sit through a 4-hour documentary on this guy.
Yes. So the defense tried to bring in Andreas Antonopoulos, who was a Bitcoin expert at the time, and also a few other computer experts to show. So the defense was trying to show that, look, these chat logs could easily have been manipulated, right? Specifically considering that they never actually had a digital fingerprint connecting it to Ross. Everything the prosecution was showing could have easily been tampered with in one way or the other by multiple different parties, and they just denied him bring these people as witnesses or as to just give their opinion on exactly what could have happened here. You know what I mean, with these chat logs, even after they brought the chat logs up, because the judge thought that it'd be unfair to the prosecution if they just brought in new potential people out of the blue like that. It didn't give them enough time to prepare or something like that. You know what I mean? But which it's obviously asymmetric because they I think right before. Okay, so this is also something funny, right? Because they're talking about how we don't want to jump the prosecution with all these new things that they weren't prepared for in the first place, right? So that alone, okay, that's fine. But here's the thing. They dumped 4 terabytes of data on the defense to read through, beforehand.
4 terabytes?
4 terabytes of data.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So let me see right here. Okay.
I have to turn to another page.
Yeah, sorry. I'm trying to find, because there was something else here that I wanted to get to. Sorry about that.
All good. Take your time. This is give people listening a little chance to kind of catch their breath, because that's a lot of information coming out here.
Right. So, oh, I think this is it. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, they tried. Ross was found guilty on all counts at the end of this, which is just infuriating. And so I do want to back up just a little bit, right? Because this is also something else, right? About like there was apparently some evidence of destroying evidence here in the court case. That was so. Do you remember when I was talking about like how this not wonderful account was talking to DPR and was trying to like giving them inside information about that there was an investigation going back, or there was an investigation going on. So during this, so there were, after they took the files from his computer and sent them off, right? They were copied and they were copied and they were copied. It was essentially a copy of a copy of a copy, and it was distributed to like the defense and the prosecution. And it was weirdly absent that all talks of this not wonderful, all like transcripts of this not wonderful account talking to DPR was somehow not there. It was just not there at all.
It's not at all.
No, it was not there in four different copies. It was not there. It was just completely gone. And there were only 4 copies, they thought. But it turned out that inside that 4 terabytes, there was a 5th copy hidden there somewhere, someplace that someone probably wouldn't have thought to look, that did include that conversation. So that's, it was absent in 4 copies that everyone else had, but the 5th copy was in locked below the 4 terabytes that the defense was given. So there's some evidence here that's like, okay, there was tampering of evidence going on for sure. Like that's a fairly, easy jump you can make.
Yeah.
So let me see. Oh, sorry, I have this here. So yeah, Ross got double life plus 40 years.
Double life plus 40 years for running a website.
For running a website. No past history of violent behavior or any criminal charges. First time offender.
What?
Yeah.
That is a lot. That's a fuck ton.
El Chapo got less.
You're kidding?
No.
Like, hold on, for real?
Yeah, El Chapo got less. He didn't get double life plus 40.
I've ever heard. That is,
yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Where is he at currently, Ross? Do you know what prison he's currently in? For people listening who want to Minecraft
I don't know exactly which one he's in right now because he's gotten transferred a lot. I think he might be in Colorado. I don't quote me on that because I'm not sure, but I think at one point he was in Colorado. Okay, so if we want to skip ahead a little bit, there was a point when Ross was put in a supermax prison because of his kingpin charge and his double life charge, which means that at one point he was in there with the worst rapists and murderers you could ever imagine. Yeah.
Why do you think he was such a target for the government? Like, is it because Bitcoin was involved? Is it because it was like the first time the government kind of felt a spread from like crypto stuff? Like,
I think the Bitcoin was probably a big reason why, but I actually there's something in here in my notes that I'll get to in a second, okay, which will just infuriate us even more. Let me find it. So after he was charged and given double life plus 40, not after he was given, sorry. After he was found guilty, hundreds of loved ones wrote in just begging and pleading the judge to give him the lightest sentence possible. And the judge was talking about like how, this is very strange to me. This seems to be, there's a lot of people who talk from all points in your life who talk about how much of a good person you were. But then that seems to conflict with, the kingpin that you've been found guilty to be, and it's like, well, yes, I wonder why. So I'll read you a quote from Ross. This was what Ross said at the sentence hearing. This is him giving an explanation as to why he started Silk Road in the first place. He said, Silk Road was supposed to be about giving people freedom to make their own choices and to pursue their own happiness, however they saw fit. I do not and have never advocated the abuse of drugs. I learned from Silk Road that when you give people freedom, you don't know what they'll do with it. While I still think people should not be denied this right or this decision for themselves, I never sought to create this site as an avenue for people to feed their addictions, right? So he's very clearly saying he was not doing this just to like sell drugs or just, it was very much a philosophical reason. So the judge accused Ross of putting himself above the law and stating that, and then oh my God. So this is, so the judge also cited, the unsubstantiated DPR reports or the DPR chat logs at the sentencing. And she talked about how, so DPR had made comments on there how the state was the oppressor. And she said she found these very troubling, how, and it was a very dangerous sentiment. And that was one of her reasons for giving him a harsh sentence.
Hold on.
She used his philosophical leanings, his beliefs, and not just, mind you, that was the DPR counsel, but yeah. So Ross is like a libertarian. She used Ross's political beliefs as a reason why she gave him double life plus 40.
I'm sorry. I need a moment for that. Hold on. Like,
yeah, I know.
Jesus, that's such a scary thing to think about. That like
yes.
Your political leanings can play a role in your sentencing in court.
Yeah,
that is like a scary. Fucking hell, man.
Yeah. So the judge said, lawlessness will not be tolerated, and so Ross pleaded for mercy, and this is another quote. He says, "I will not lose my love for humanity during my years of imprisonment, and upon my release, I will make it up for not being there for the people I love. If I do make it out of prison decades from now, I will not be the same man, and the world won't be the same place. I'll be an old man, at least 50, with the additional wear and tear that prison life brings." Next page. I will know better than anyone the heavy price of breaking the law, and I will know that it is not worth it. I've had my youth, and I know you must take my middle years, but please leave my old age. Please leave a little light at the end of the tunnel and a chance to redeem myself in the free world before I meet my maker. And then, of course, then the judge gave him double life plus 40.
Fucking bits.
Yeah.
There is no circle of hell too deep for this woman.
Yeah. So Judge Forrest told Ross, this was after she sentenced him, or during the sentencing, sorry. The reason you started Silk Road were for philosophical reasons, and I don't know if it's a philosophy you've left behind. The judge wanted to send a message to anyone else with a similar philosophy about the dangers of law, how law breaking will not be tolerated.
I don't think it's anyone I hate more right now. Like, there's a lot of people I hate, but that woman might take the top of the list.
Yeah. And a copycat Silk Road started soon after the original one was taken down. And the creator there of that Silk Road, and this was a Silk Road that did not have Ross's libertarian instincts. There was a lot of depraved things on that Silk Road. And the creator of that Silk Road spent 13 days in jail.
Wait, hold on. It was not as like they allowed things that want not violations, more violent crime.
Yes.
And he said, how long? He said
13 days. He was released.
What the fuck, man?
Yeah.
What? Oh, okay. People listening, here is a picture because I am going to show a picture of the judge because I think this is fair. Where's my share screen? I'm going to show a picture of the judge because that seems something we should look at here. This is exactly the kind of white woman that must be stopped. She looks like every Karen you hate. How
that's her at the sentencing, the other one.
Even in the drawing, she looks like a bitch. Okay. This is not count as doxing, I believe, because that is a public image.
But public info, it's not doxing.
It's not doxing. So, wow. Okay, so what are somebody I'm gonna be in my head a little bit. What are some of the arguments people when you bring up Ross or you talk about Ross? What are some of the people who are for this sentencing kind of say against it? Like when you say Ross should be free, what are the arguments people give you
The
I
most
said it'd be
common
free.
thing, the most common thing you'll ever see from people is that Ross hired hitmen and he deserves to be in jail.
What did they?
That,
What did they say when he said he was never charged? Was that like?
oh yeah, that's now see, this is the thing where you think of that. Well, obviously, if he's never charged, why would he be in jail? And they'll say, well, he probably did it. Which when you hear people do this, when I've lost all faith in juries forever. Like, no, I like, honestly, the amount of people I've heard say, well, he probably did it, so he deserves to be there. It's like, I hope you never serve on a jury because you're going to ruin a person's life, like, legitimately.
No, absolutely. Like, juries are such a weird thing. I did this thing called teen court down here, where basically if you were under the age of 18 and you committed a crime, you could plead guilty, and then you would go to a court of your own peers, teenagers, and they would sentence you, and you would never go on your permanent record. And great, it's honestly a good program. My own problem is the kids have to admit their guilt, but they avoid permanent records. But given how terrible the court
and it's
system
actually
is,
of your peers, right? It's
right, which is kind of nice. But being on that, the amount of like, how do I put this? Any chance someone got to anonymously fuck someone over, they took it.
Yeah.
It was a weird phenomenon. Like, I'm watching these people just like, oh, he had an ounce of weed, therefore let's give him everything we can. It's like, wait, what the fuck? Like,
I also forgot to mention when I was going through my notes, there was another thing the judge did that really poisoned the well against Ross. So when the jury was selected, the judge made them all anonymous. And what that meant was that the reason when a judge makes the jury anonymous, that usually means that the person is very dangerous who's being accused of the crimes, because the idea is if they're not anonymous, if they ever got out, they could go after the jury who put them away. Do you know what I mean? So the fact that the judge made the jury anonymous instilled within the jury this idea that, oh wow, this guy must be dangerous before any, you know what I mean? So
like, I understand the need to have a system like that where you can make it zero anonymous, but I feel like that should just be the norm.
But that's actually not common though. That's not super common. That's the thing.
My God, they really like. Wow, anything they could do to like change Zoe's mind about this, like,
yes,
there is no imposter, and any of them imposter judge is bullshit.
Wow. Yeah, it's infuriating. It's one of the most infuriating cases I've ever like delved into.
I trying to like form my thoughts around this to ask questions, but I'm just kind of a blind rage right now.
Yeah, I'm just checking my notes to make sure I didn't skip over anything crucial here, but I think that was the
pretty much the
main. Yeah.
Okay. So the logs, all the kind of seem to hinge on the logs. That's like really the best evidence they have.
Well, but here's the thing, though. Not real. So there was like a journal on Ross's computer where it seemed to have like the DPR logs had like he had a journal of the DPR logs on there, and that's kind of what they used to tie him to the DPR who was putting out hits on people. But then you have to stop and think. Okay, wait a minute. If they really believe that it was just a drop shut case, why didn't they charge him with murder for hire?
Yeah.
Because like when you think about it, like, well, it all hinges on the logs. It actually doesn't, because he was never even charged for what was mostly present on those logs. So when you think about that in terms of the case itself, it's like, no, that actually is one of the most irrelevant like points of the case, which is just mind boggling, because that's like the only thing they actually have.
Yeah. Like the only thing they really had was the logs, and they. Okay. What is being done currently? Because I heard the mom give a speech at the Tom Woods event. What is currently being done to rectify this?
So from what I know, I could be wrong on this, but last time I checked into this, the family had used up all their appeals, so they can't appeal to court anymore, and the Supreme Court did not hear the case when it could have gone to the Supreme Court. So they used up all their appeals, and I think the best chance they have now is a pardon. And it's not, I hate to say it, but the pardon is not likely. I hold out hope for a pardon, but it's not very likely. There's this, I don't know if you're familiar about this, Trump in one of his last days as president, or his last week of president. It was right after I think he lost the election. There was a story that came out that said Ross was on Trump's list of people who he was going to pardon. And that was a big story that came out, and people, including myself, were like really hyped up. And of course, you had like thousands of people online because this was a big story because Trump's name was attached to it. And you had all these people talking about how, oh, he's a hired hitman, he's a kingpin. It's like, no. But
I
but
bet
yeah,
you. I bet you didn't sleep much during that time.
I responded to so many people that day because I was just furious. Nothing nothing makes me. Very few things make me mad on Twitter, but when I see people like talking shit about Ross, it just infuriates me. It's so like maddening to me. But yeah, he didn't pardon him, and that was really depressing. I think there's still what people can do though is that you can sign the petition. I recommend everyone sign the petition. The free
It will
Ross
be in the
petition.
link in the description.
Yeah, you go to freeross.org, which is you can find all the stuff there that I've talked about. It's on that site. Freeross.org is a great site. Lynn Ulbricht is a hero. That site, and then there's all the ways to donate, which also helps. You can send Ross letters. You can send Ross letters, and he does tend to reply to them. So that's also something you can do. Yeah, it's just tragic. It's a tragedy. It's
Absolutely.
It's
one of the things. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One of the things Ross's mom said at the Tom Woods event was that Trump had the power to pardon Ross, and all he would have had to do was deal with people on Twitter being mad at him for a few days, and it would have been over. And once I heard that, I was like, oh, I had a lot of faith in presidents of pardon kind of thing. Like, there's still ways that could be useful. But after hearing now, like, oh yeah, these what's the word I'm looking for here? Besides monster, not the correct word, but like they're so concerned with the responses on Twitter about negative attitudes toward them that they're like, I can't free a guy who's unlawfully imprisoned. It's
and like honestly, even if you let's just accept that he did everything Ross did. Like let's just give them the benefit of the doubt and say all their charges were like Ross did those things. That would still not add up to the sentence he got.
Yeah.
Like there's the worst rapists and murderers you can ever imagine don't get that.
I'm gonna look up what the normal charges for a hiring hitman. See how long that would be. If he did the worst thing they claim he did, or never charged him with.
Never charged him, but claimed. And it wasn't even. It turned out not to be even successful. So it was it was an attempted murder for hire. It wasn't even
to hire.
I think it depends, but it ranges from like 10 to 30 years or something like that. 30 being the extreme.
Joe Exotic got 22.
Yeah.
So I guess that's. Yeah. Wow. That is. Okay, so we've covered the whole story. I have all my questions answered. We kind of have nowhere to go. freeross.org.
Yeah.
Is there anything you've missed you want to add, or anything you want to cover a little bit in detail here?
I'm trying to think. I don't. So after the trial, the Reason magazine got subpoenaed by the FBI. Their online side, the online Reason website, got subpoenaed by the FBI because one of the commenters said that, and this is a quote. I'm just quoting here. Said that when the revolution happens, the judge will be the first person in the wood chipper, and then quote unquote. So the FBI subpoenaed Reason and subpoenaed that comment, and so that's just something they went after. So, but yeah. I'm just double checking here, making sure I didn't skip over anything crucial. Yeah, the agents eventually got Sean Bridges and Karl Mark Force spent 6 and 8 years, I think, respectively.
Yeah, that is the craziest part of the story to me. The investigating people were charged for actually did during the investigation and did not poison the well or make any difference in the.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of any other kind of miscarriage of justice I've heard of. I can't think of one that kind of even comes close.
Right. It's so infuriating. And the judge is everything that happened is so terrible, but the judge's statements at sentencing is what always makes me furious. The fact that, she used his philosophical leanings to justify her sentence on him.
That is such a scary thought that you
Yeah.
could be in jail for anything, and then they could go to your Twitter and just be like, "Well, you have anti-government leanings." Oh my god!
And the person. So he for one, I think it's important to clarify. Obviously, I think you and I would both say no one should be in jail for drugs. But even if you are someone who does believe that you should be in jail for drugs, I think the person who sold the most drugs on Silk Road only got 10 years for it. And I mean, I'm glad they only got 10 years. They shouldn't have gotten any. But I'm just saying, compared to Ross, it's like, so that guy gets 10 years. Ross gets double life plus 40.
Just for facilitating a website. Like if I put up a flea market and someone sells a drug at the flea market,
it's like Craigslist. Drugs get sold on Craigslist all the time. No one goes after Craigslist.
All sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, even Tinder. You just put "I want a plug," and you find the drug dealers on Tinder.
Right.
Like it, and no one cares.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fuck, man. I knew it was bad. I knew doing the episode, like, this is gonna be bad, but I did not expect it to be this fucking bad.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess you have Ace, have anything you want to add?
I don't think I have anything more to add. Just like, if you have time, I think everyone should sign the petition, and if you can, donate. But I think it truly would be like just a very nice gesture if like people went and like, if you had time, write Ross a letter, like write him a really kind letter and send it to him, because I think on freeross.org you can there's ways where you can get in contact with Ross. Like they'll give you the information to like where to send your letters and where to mail them.
Didn't he make a phone call at a Bitcoin conference recently?
Yes, he did. Yes.
So he still has some outside contact.
Yes. Although there was a time when he was in isolated confinement, which is just like, it's considered torture.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
And again, there's one time when he was at us. So there was a time when, okay, I have to tell this story because it's like, this was from his mother, but Ross was in a supermax prison, as I was saying at one point, right? And the supermax prison is where they keep the worst of the worst people. Like these are the worst rapists and murderers and pedophiles and things like that. And apparently, from what Ross's mother said, is that there was a time when the people in prison, like the actual people, will say, you have to go like hurt that other prisoner, or we're going to like hurt you, type thing. They do this is like kind of like a prison ritual, like initiation type thing. And Ross said no. Ross apparently refused and said, no, it's never okay to like hurt another person. And that's why they had to separate. So the guards actually had to separate Ross from the other violent prisoners, because even the prison guards in prison, the prison guards would tell Lynn Ulbricht, his mother, that, hey, this guy doesn't deserve to be here. Like even the prison guards know.
I hate everything about this country now.
Yeah.
Fuck. Okay, everyone listening, donate, sign a petition, write Ross a letter.
The petition only says 500,000. The petition only has 500,000 signatures on it. I think it's very close to 500,000, which is an insane number for a petition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone, if you, after hearing this podcast, people, you should have enough information to argue about this. Talk to people about it. Really,
absolutely.
More people need to know the story, because I'm an anarchist.
And you know what? Like I was gonna say, I'm an anarchist, but if you can call your local representative and harass them about this, do it. Like absolutely,
I'm all
just
for
do
harassing
anything.
politicians.
Yes,
all for harassing politicians. Let's do it.
Yeah, so just try to like spread it and try to get more people to know the actual story behind it. Because it's just like, I don't mean to be dreadful about it, but it's like you're kind of powerless, and you kind of have to accept that you're kind of powerless in this situation, and you just have to sit with that, and it's kind of infuriating. But it's an extremely important case. It's an important issue, and it's like I think it's when you see injustice happen before your eyes like this, it's just like this visceral gut reaction. Like this indignity that was committed against this person, against Ross. It's just horrible. And like, his mother is like a superhuman for being able to power through this for years. Like, she's obviously the hardest hit, and it's just unbelievable that she's still.
She gave a speech about those things, and see, like, it was moving. It was incredible. Yeah. I mean, okay, excuse me. I one thing I wanted to add. Anyone listening, if you argue with somebody or you think someone will be interested in the story, say it on the podcast. We kind of covered this thing. This is I wanted to be around an hour, a little over, but say it to people if they have any interest in it. This is a bare bones explain like on 5 intro to it. So say the podcast.
And if you look up the Railroaded, and I think in podcast format's probably the best way. Railroaded, the story of Ross Ulbricht. It goes into everything I said and more. So if you really want the full package and everything, go to that. Check that out too.
Yes. Okay. Ace, go ahead and give your plugs.
I honestly don't, just Ace_Arcus on Twitter, and I would just plug Free Ross again and do what you can from there. Yeah.
I have to get to bed because I have things going on, but I will be updating the description tomorrow with all the links because there's
okay. I'll send you some too after this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me back on.
No problem. Anytime. Guys, this has been an episode of Catholic Libertarian Podcast. Free Ross.